My sister stole my identity to buy a luxury home. She didn't expect the closing attorney to call me. The first time I saw the house my sister had bought in my name, it was through a real estate listing that congratulated a woman I had never met on beginning her next chapter. The woman was my sister. The name printed beneath her photograph was mine. I was sitting in a conference room at work when the call came. I almost ignored it because I was 10 minutes away from presenting a quarterly risk report, and the number belonged to a law firm in another county. The caller introduced herself as Naomi Patel, the closing attorney for a property on Bellwether Lane. She said she needed to verify one final detail before funds were released. Then she asked whether I wanted my ownership interest recorded as Evelyn Grace Morgan or Evelyn G. Morgan. I told her she had the wrong person. There was a pause long enough for the air conditioner above me to click off. Naomi read my date of birth, the last 4 digits of my social security number, and the address of the apartment where I had lived 6 years earlier. Every detail was correct. She asked whether I had authorized a woman named Vanessa Morgan to sign documents under a limited power of attorney. Vanessa was my younger sister. For a few seconds, I could hear nothing except blood moving in my ears. I asked Naomi not to contact Vanessa and not to release the funds. My voice sounded remarkably calm, which was probably the result of spending 9 years investigating financial misconduct for an insurance company. Calm was something I had learned to manufacture while everything underneath it burned. Naomi did not tell me what she intended to do. She said only that the closing would be paused for a routine compliance review and asked me to send a photograph of my driver's license through a secure portal. Before ending the call, she warned me not to confront anyone until we understood the scope of the problem. I opened the address she gave me. The house stood behind black iron gates in an expensive suburb 40 minutes from the city. It had 6 bedrooms, a limestone facade, a pool with a narrow waterfall, and a kitchen larger than my entire first apartment. The listing photographs showed pale oak floors, arched windows, and a temperature-controlled wine room. The price was $2.38 million. The final photograph had been added by the listing agent that morning. Vanessa stood on the front steps in a cream suit, one hand resting on the brass handle of the double doors. Beside her was her fiancé, Cole, smiling as if he had personally invented money. A gold key hung from a ribbon between them. The caption called Vanessa a beauty entrepreneur and identified the happy buyer as Evelyn Morgan, founder of Morgan House Collective. I had never founded Morgan House Collective. I had never applied for that mortgage. I had never seen the power of attorney bearing my name, but I recognized the cream suit. Our mother had sent me a photograph of Vanessa wearing it 2 weeks earlier and told me it was for an important business meeting. She had added that Vanessa was finally becoming the kind of woman our late father would have been proud of. That sentence had hurt when I first read it. Looking at the listing, it became evidence. Vanessa had always lived in the narrow space between charm and catastrophe. She was 4 years younger than I was, beautiful in a way that made strangers volunteer favors, and convinced that consequences were a form of bad luck rather than the result of her decisions. When we were children, she borrowed my clothes and returned them stained. In college, she used my emergency credit card to fund a spring break trip and cried until our mother persuaded me not to report it. At 28, she launched a skincare company with money from relatives, closed it 11 months later, and described the unpaid vendors as people who did not understand visionary businesses. Our mother called Vanessa brave. She called me practical. Practical meant I was expected to absorb whatever Vanessa broke. I helped our mother refinance her home after my father died. I paid the property taxes Vanessa had promised to cover. I reviewed contracts for 3 of Vanessa's failed ventures without charging her, then listened while she told relatives that I was jealous because she had the courage to work for herself. Whenever I objected, my mother reminded me that family was not a ledger. She was right. A ledger would have shown what everyone owed. I sent Naomi my identification and asked for copies of any documents I was legally entitled to see. Then I stepped into my presentation, explained loss trends to 12 executives, and answered questions about fraud controls, while my sister was attempting to turn me into a borrower on a house I could not afford. No one in the room knew. By the time I returned to my office, Naomi had sent a secure folder. The mortgage application claimed I earned $386,000 a year as the chief operating officer of Morgan House Collective. It included tax returns with my name and social security number, bank statements showing $611,000 in deposits, and a letter from an accountant confirming my ownership in the company. The photograph attached to the application was Vanessa's. The signature was an imitation of mine, careful enough to pass casual inspection, but too rounded at the end of each word. Vanessa had practiced my signature on birthday cards since she was a teenager. The limited power of attorney was notarized by a man named Darren Pike. It claimed that I was temporarily living in Singapore while expanding my business and had appointed Vanessa to complete the purchase. The document listed my correct passport number. That detail frightened me more than the house. My passport was locked in a small, fireproof box in my apartment. Only 2 people had ever known the code, me and my mother. I had given it to her 3 years earlier when I underwent emergency surgery and asked her to retrieve my health directive. I had changed the code afterward, but not until a week later. At the time, nothing appeared missing. The financial documents contained another surprise. The bank statements were not entirely fabricated. They belonged to an account opened in my name 8 months earlier. Money had moved through it in large, regular circles, deposits from Morgan House Collective, transfers to a holding company, and returns labeled as consulting revenue. It looked like income if someone glanced quickly. To anyone trained in fraud, it looked like layering. I checked my credit through all 3 bureaus. 2 inquiries appeared that I had never authorized. There was a new business credit card with a $70,000 limit and a line of credit for $250,000. Both were close to their limits. My score had fallen by 143 points. I wanted to drive to Vanessa's apartment and demand an explanation. I wanted to call my mother and ask when she had decided that my future was acceptable collateral for Vanessa's fantasy. Instead, I followed the rule I had repeated to clients for years: preserve first, react later. I downloaded every report, froze my credit, changed my passwords, and contacted the Identity Theft Division at the police department. Because the attempted mortgage crossed county lines and involved federally insured lending, the detective also referred the case to a financial crimes task force. I filed an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission and notified the lenders in writing. I did not call my family. At 6 that evening, Vanessa called me. She did not mention the house. She said our mother wanted everyone at dinner on Sunday because she had big family news. Her tone was bright but tight, as if she were reading from a script while watching a door. I said I would be there. An hour later, my mother called separately. She asked whether work had been unusually busy and whether I had received any strange calls. The question was wrapped in casual concern, but my mother had never once asked me about strange calls in 36 years. I told her an attorney had called about a routine paperwork issue. Silence spread between us. Then she laughed too quickly and said, "Lawyers made everything sound serious." She suggested I ignore the call until Sunday because Vanessa planned to explain something that would benefit all of us. That was the moment I knew my mother was involved. Naomi called the next morning from a different number. She had confirmed that the notary's commission was valid, but that he had reported his seal stolen 6 months earlier. The accountant named on the income letter had died the previous year. The loan officer who assembled the file had insisted that he met Evelyn twice over video, but both sessions had been arranged by Cole. Naomi had also learned that the title company received instructions to return $184,000 of excess proceeds to an account controlled by Morgan House Collective after closing. The house was not merely a purchase, it was a machine for extracting cash. Naomi explained the likely structure. Vanessa and Cole had negotiated seller credits, inflated renovation estimates, and arranged short-term private funds for the down payment. Once the mortgage funded, the excess would repay part of those private funds and provide enough cash to stage the house, build social media content, and convince investors that Morgan House Collective was thriving. My strong employment history and clean credit made the loan possible. Vanessa's public image would make the illusion profitable. The plan depended on speed. If the closing failed, their private lender could seize pledged collateral. Naomi did not yet know what that collateral was. I did. Our mother's house had been fully paid off after I refinanced it and helped clear the remaining balance with my father's life insurance. It was the only significant asset in the family. I searched county records and found a deed of trust recorded 3 months earlier. My mother had borrowed $420,000 from a private investment company called Northline Capital. The document listed Vanessa's business as a co-borrower. My mother had risked the house where she and my father raised us. She had also helped Vanessa risk my name. Sunday dinner was held at that same house. I arrived with my phone recording inside my bag, after confirming with the detective that our state allowed one-party consent. Naomi and the task force knew about the meeting. No one promised that a confession would occur. People rarely confessed cleanly. They minimized, justified, blamed, and accidentally supplied missing facts. That was often enough. Vanessa had decorated the dining room with white orchids and gold candles, as though we were celebrating an engagement. Cole wore a navy blazer and spent most of the first half-hour checking his phone. My mother hovered near me, offering wine, touching my shoulder and telling me I looked tired. Her tenderness felt like someone smoothing a blanket over a body. After dinner, Vanessa projected photographs of Bellwether Lane onto the living room television. She announced that she and Cole were launching a luxury home and lifestyle brand. The house would be their residence, showroom, filming studio, and proof of concept. She described sponsored events, design collaborations, and membership retreats. My mother watched her with wet eyes. Then Vanessa said the legal structure was temporarily in my name. She presented it as an administrative convenience. Because her last company had failed, traditional financing would have taken longer. Because I had stable credit, using my information allowed the family to secure the property before another buyer did. She insisted the mortgage would be transferred to the company within 6 months. I would receive a 10% ownership interest for doing nothing. I asked what she meant by using my information. Vanessa smiled as if I were making the conversation unnecessarily formal. She said they had handled the paperwork through a power of attorney and that Mom had confirmed I would help if I understood the opportunity. My mother immediately added that she knew my heart and had acted with the family's best interests in mind. I asked whether they had copied my passport. My mother's face changed. It was subtle, a slight pull around the mouth, but it told me more than an answer. Vanessa said identity documents were standard for major transactions. Cole finally looked up from his phone. I asked about the business credit card. Vanessa's smile disappeared. She said it was bridge financing and would be paid after closing. She accused me of approaching a family opportunity like a criminal investigation. The irony was so complete that I nearly laughed. My mother began the speech I had heard in different forms all my life. Vanessa had gifts that required support. I had always been secure and capable. A family should use its strengths collectively. Our father would have wanted us to build something lasting, instead of clinging to individual ownership. I asked whether Dad would have wanted her to pledge the house to Northline Capital. The room went still. Cole stood and walked toward the window. Vanessa looked at our mother with open fury, not because the loan existed, but because I knew about it. My mother sat down slowly. She said the loan was temporary and that Bellwether Lane would create enough value to protect everything. I asked who had introduced them to Northline. Cole answered before Vanessa could stop him. He said the company funded unconventional entrepreneurs and understood asset-based opportunities. His explanation was polished, full of phrases that meant nothing. When I asked about the $184,000 disbursement after closing, he said that money belonged to the project because they had already incurred development expenses. That was useful. Until then, the documents showed the payment instructions, but not that Cole knew about them. Vanessa demanded to know how I had accessed confidential records. I said the closing attorney had called me. Fear moved across her face so quickly that she could not hide it. She asked exactly what Naomi had said. I told her only that there was a question about my name. Vanessa recovered and leaned toward me. She said nothing had been completed, so no one had been harmed. If I cooperated the next morning, everything could still close. She promised that the debt would never touch my salary or apartment. She told me I was standing between the family and financial freedom because of a technical objection. Forgery was now a technical objection. I asked whether she had filed tax returns in my name. She said those were provisional financial statements, prepared solely for underwriting, and would never reach the government. Cole corrected her, saying the returns were legitimate amended filings produced by their accountant. They contradicted each other within 5 seconds. My mother began crying. She said she had not understood every document and had trusted Vanessa and Cole. Then she admitted retrieving my passport information because Vanessa told her it was needed to add me as an investor. She insisted she had never seen the mortgage application. Vanessa snapped that Mom had signed as a witness and knew perfectly well why they needed my identity. My mother replied that Vanessa had promised the paperwork was legal. There it was, not a clean confession, but the family truth. Under pressure, they had turned on one another before I had raised my voice. I told them my credit was frozen and the lenders had been notified. The closing would not happen. Vanessa stared at me as though I had announced a death. Cole left the room and began making calls in the hallway. My mother gripped the edge of the sofa. She asked what would happen to her home. I said I did not know. That answer was honest, and it hurt more than anything cruel I might have invented. Vanessa followed me to the front door. Her panic had transformed into rage. She said I had always resented her because people noticed her first. She accused me of waiting for a chance to humiliate her. According to her, she had intended to make all of us wealthy, while I preferred to remain small because small things were easy to control. I looked at the sister I had rescued from overdraft fees, eviction notices, tax penalties, and bad contracts. I realized she had converted every rescue into proof that consequences were negotiable. My help had not made her grateful. It had taught her that I was a resource. I told her that she had not borrowed my name. She had stolen the life attached to it. Then I left. The closing was scheduled for Monday at 10. Naomi kept it on the calendar without releasing funds because investigators wanted to see who appeared and what documents they brought. Vanessa believed there was still a chance I could be pressured into cooperating. At 8:12 that morning, she sent me a revised agreement granting me 15% of Morgan House Collective. At 8:47, my mother left a voicemail saying she might lose her home if I refused. At 9:06, Cole emailed a statement claiming the use of my identity had been authorized orally during a Christmas dinner 18 months earlier. At 9:31, someone attempted to lift the freeze on my credit using answers to security questions about my childhood. The attempt came from my mother's home internet connection. I forwarded the alert to the detective. Vanessa arrived at Naomi's office wearing the same cream suit from the listing photograph. Cole carried a leather document case. My mother came separately and sat in the lobby. I was not there, but Naomi later described the scene to me and security footage preserved the rest. Naomi told them the lender required a live video confirmation from me. Vanessa claimed I was in Singapore and unavailable due to the time difference. It was just after 10 at night in Singapore, not an impossible hour, but she produced a letter stating I was attending a confidential investor retreat without phone access. The letter bore the logo of a real hotel and the signature of a manager who did not exist. Cole then presented another power of attorney, broader than the first and supposedly signed 2 days earlier. The forged notary block used a different seal. Investigators had provided Naomi with a list of questions designed to establish knowledge. She asked why a new authorization was necessary if the original remained valid. Cole said the lender requested it. The lender had not. Naomi asked Vanessa to confirm the account receiving the excess proceeds. Vanessa did so and signed an updated disbursement instruction. She signed my name. Only after the ink was on the paper did Naomi leave the room. 2 detectives entered with a postal inspector and an investigator from the lender. They did not stage a dramatic arrest in front of cameras. Real consequences were quieter. Cole was separated from Vanessa. Their phones and documents were seized under warrants prepared over the weekend. Vanessa was taken for questioning and released that evening pending formal charges. Cole was held because investigators discovered he had used another identity in a previous real estate transaction. My mother was not arrested that day. She called me from the parking lot, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She said Vanessa needed a lawyer and asked whether I could recommend someone. Even then, her first instinct was to ask me to repair the damage. I ended the call. Within 48 hours, Morgan House Collective collapsed. The company's website disappeared. Brands removed Vanessa's affiliate links. The listing agent deleted the closing photograph, though screenshots had already spread through local social media. Northline Capital sent our mother a default notice because the Bellwether purchase had failed and the private loan had matured under an acceleration clause. Vanessa posted a video claiming that a jealous relative had sabotaged a legitimate family business. She did not use my name, but she described me precisely enough that friends identified me. She said modern women were often punished for being ambitious and suggested that paperwork misunderstandings were being weaponized against her. The video received thousands of sympathetic comments before a local reporter found the federal court filings connected to Cole's earlier scheme. Then the sympathy changed direction. The criminal complaint revealed that Cole had met Vanessa 18 months earlier at a branding conference. He presented himself as a real estate investor with access to private capital. In reality, he had been barred from working for a mortgage brokerage after an internal fraud investigation. He taught Vanessa how to create the appearance of revenue by circulating borrowed money through related accounts. He did not force her to steal my identity. Messages recovered from their phones showed that Vanessa suggested me because my credit was pristine and I was too loyal to press charges. That line appeared in an affidavit. Reading it did something strange to me. I had expected betrayal to feel sharp. Instead, it felt like a door closing quietly in an empty house. The messages also showed that my mother knew more than she admitted. Vanessa had first asked her for my passport number and previous addresses. My mother hesitated, then agreed after Vanessa promised to repay the Northline loan and put the family home into a trust. Later, when a lender requested video verification, my mother helped rehearse Vanessa's answers about my employment. She objected once, writing that I would never forgive them if I found out. Vanessa replied that I would be angry, but would eventually understand because I always did. My mother sent back a heart. The hardest part was not clearing my credit. It was accepting that they had studied my capacity for forgiveness as if it were a weakness in a security system. I hired my own attorney, Rebecca Lynn, who specialized in identity theft and creditor disputes. Together, we sent formal notices to every institution involved. The business card issuer removed the account within 3 weeks after comparing the application video with my identification. The line of credit lender resisted longer, arguing that transfers had gone to an account in my name. Rebecca provided my work access logs, travel history, police report, and handwriting analysis. The lender eventually froze collection and joined the case as another victim. The tax returns were more complicated. They had been electronically submitted, not merely fabricated for underwriting. Vanessa and Cole filed 2 years of amended returns showing business income I had never earned, presumably to make the mortgage file appear verifiable through tax transcripts. That created a potential tax debt exceeding $170,000. For months, every official envelope made my stomach tighten. I spent evenings organizing evidence at my dining table. I built timelines, matched transfers, and labeled communications. It was the kind of work I did professionally, except the suspect photographs showed the face that had slept beside me during thunderstorms when we were children. Some nights I remembered Vanessa at 8 years old, following me through the woods behind our house and trusting me to lead her home. Grief did not make her innocent. It simply refused to stay separate from anger. My employer learned about the case when an investigator requested verification of my compensation. I told my director before rumors reached him. I expected suspicion. People who work in risk are judged harshly when fraud enters their personal lives, as though expertise should make betrayal impossible. Instead, my director asked whether I needed leave. The company's legal team provided certified employment records and a letter confirming I had disclosed the issue promptly. My colleagues covered 2 major reviews while I met with investigators. Their uncomplicated support embarrassed me at first because I was accustomed to help arriving with a future obligation attached. My mother's situation deteriorated. Northline scheduled a foreclosure sale. She hired a lawyer using money from a retirement account and argued that Cole had misrepresented the loan. The documents, however, were clear. She had signed before an independent notary. She had acknowledged that her home secured a commercial venture and that the full balance could become due if the bellwether purchase failed. She came to my apartment without warning one rainy evening, 4 months after the closing. I watched her through the door camera for nearly a minute before letting her in. She looked older. Her hair was damp, and she held a folder against her chest. She said she was not asking me to forgive Vanessa. She was asking me to save the house. There were several ways I could have done it. I had substantial savings, partly because I had spent my adult life preparing for emergencies. With a loan against my retirement account and a home equity investment from a friend, I might have negotiated with Northline. My mother knew that. She also knew I had once promised my father I would make sure she never lost the house. She placed the folder on my table. Inside were childhood photographs, my father's handwritten notes from the renovation, and an old copy of the mortgage satisfaction letter. She was not threatening me. The manipulation was softer than that. She was arranging my memories around the outcome she wanted. I asked her why she gave Vanessa my passport information. She said she believed the business would succeed. I asked why belief gave her the right to decide for me. She said mothers sometimes made choices for the whole family. I reminded her that I was 36, not 6. Eventually, she stopped defending the decision and began explaining the hierarchy beneath it. Vanessa had always seemed fragile to her, even when she was loud and reckless. I had seemed solid. After my father died, my mother feared Vanessa would drift away or collapse, so she kept giving her reasons to return. Money, praise, rescue, and excuses became forms of gravity. She assumed I would remain nearby without them. It was the closest she came to honesty. She admitted she had expected me to be furious, but not to involve police. She thought I would demand a contract, perhaps a larger share of the company, and then help them close. She had mistaken my history of protecting the family for consent to be sacrificed by it. I told her I would not pay Northline. My mother cried without theatrics. She gathered the photographs slowly and asked whether my father's promise meant nothing. I told her my promise had been to protect her from misfortune, not to finance fraud committed against me. Saving the house would erase the only consequence she could not shift onto someone else. She left the folder behind. For a week, it sat unopened on my table. Then I mailed it back. Northline postponed the sale twice while negotiating. Ultimately, my mother sold the house before foreclosure. The price covered the private loan, fees, and taxes, leaving her enough to purchase a small condominium in a neighboring town without a mortgage. She called it a humiliating downgrade. I called it a safe home she owned outright. We did not agree. My relatives divided into camps. An aunt told me that sending one sister to prison over money was cruel. A cousin asked why I had not handled it privately. People who had never offered Vanessa $1 were remarkably generous with my future. I stopped explaining. I sent anyone who pressed me a copy of the first page of the criminal complaint, with the dollar amounts highlighted. Most did not respond. Vanessa accepted a plea agreement 11 months after the failed closing. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, false tax filings, recorded admissions, device messages, and her signature on the final disbursement instruction. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Cole faced additional charges involving 2 other victims and received a longer sentence. At Vanessa's sentencing, her attorney described her as a creative entrepreneur, manipulated by a sophisticated man. The prosecutor displayed messages showing that she researched the penalties for mortgage fraud before submitting the application. Vanessa addressed the court and apologized for letting ambition blur boundaries. She said she never intended for me to suffer a permanent loss because she planned to repay everything. That was the same logic she had used with my clothes, my credit card, and every other thing she took. In her mind, theft became borrowing if she imagined returning the value someday. The judge asked whether I wanted to speak. I had prepared 6 pages. When I stood, I used less than 1. I explained that identity was not a number printed on government documents. It was the accumulated proof that allowed a person to move through the world, to rent a home, accept a job, borrow money, pay taxes, and be believed. Vanessa had taken that proof and used it as raw material for a performance. She had forced me to demonstrate my own existence to strangers while she wore my name. I said the financial damage could be repaired. The knowledge that my mother and sister viewed my trust as an exploitable asset could not. I did not ask for the maximum sentence. I asked the court not to mistake family access for lesser harm. Vanessa received 32 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release, and was ordered to pay restitution jointly with Cole. Some relatives called the sentence excessive. Others quietly stopped inviting my mother to events because the case made them uncomfortable. Consequences rarely land only on the guilty. They rearrange every relationship nearby. The civil case continued after sentencing. The mortgage lender formally withdrew all claims against me. The credit bureaus removed the fraudulent accounts and inquiries. The IRS corrected my records after an identity theft examination that lasted nearly a year. My credit score recovered slowly, then rose above where it had been before. There was one final dispute over the money that had passed through the account opened in my name. Nearly $90,000 remained after investigators froze it. Northline claimed the balance as proceeds of its loan. 2 vendors claimed they had supplied furniture and marketing services to Vanessa. The government considered it traceable fraud money. Because the account carried my name, every party served papers on me. Rebecca advised me not to claim $1, even though some of the deposits technically appeared as compensation paid to me. We filed a declaration stating that I had never controlled the account and disclaimed any beneficial interest except reimbursement for documented expenses. That choice cost me nothing I had earned, but it mattered psychologically. Vanessa had built the scheme by making fiction look official. I wanted every line of my response to reflect reality, even when a more aggressive position might have been profitable. The court eventually distributed most of the frozen funds among the defrauded lenders and vendors. A smaller portion covered expenses related to restoring my identity. When the reimbursement check arrived, I used it to pay Rebecca and placed the remainder in a separate savings account. I named the account Home, though I had no immediate plan to buy one. My experience also changed how I worked. Before the case, I thought of fraud controls primarily as barriers: verification steps, exception reports, approval limits, and audit trails. Afterward, I understood the human humiliation hidden inside every false account. A victim could tell the truth perfectly and still sound less convincing than a folder of coordinated lies. I proposed a new protocol at my company for handling identity disputes. Instead of forcing customers to repeat their story to multiple departments, one specialist would own the case from first notice through resolution. We added independent contact verification for high-value changes and prohibited employees from relying solely on information supplied within a disputed file. The design borrowed directly from Naomi's decision to call my public work number. The protocol reduced investigation time and prevented 2 attempted payments during its first quarter. My director asked me to lead a small financial integrity team. The promotion increased my salary, but the part that mattered most was knowing the worst thing my family had done with my professional reputation had sharpened rather than destroyed it. I did not tell Vanessa about the promotion. Earlier in our lives, every good thing I achieved became a new measuring stick for her resentment, or a new resource she believed the family should share. Keeping some happiness private was not secrecy, it was ownership. Naomi became more than the voice that stopped the closing. She testified, provided documents, and checked on me whenever a new filing appeared. Over coffee one afternoon, she told me why she had called. The file had passed automated checks. The identification numbers matched. The tax transcripts existed. The employment letter appeared professional. Vanessa looked enough like me that a careless reviewer could attribute differences to lighting and age. What bothered Naomi was a minor inconsistency in the signature block. The loan documents used Evelyn G. Morgan, while the power of attorney authorized Evelyn Grace Morgan. Either form would have been legally acceptable, but Naomi preferred deeds to match the owner's established signature. She called the number on my employer's public directory instead of the mobile number in the file. That tiny decision preserved my life. I asked what would have happened if she had used the number Vanessa supplied. Naomi said Vanessa would have answered, the funds would have moved, and I might not have discovered the fraud until a missed payment appeared months later. By then, the money would be gone, my mother's home would still be pledged, and Bellwether Lane might have been encumbered by additional debt. For a long time, I thought about how close they came. Then I stopped treating Naomi's call as luck alone. Systems failed because people ignored details. Systems also worked because someone cared enough to notice one. Bellwether Lane returned to the market after the sellers terminated the contract. The scandal made buyers cautious, and the house sat empty for months. Every few weeks, an algorithm showed me the listing because I had visited it so often. The price dropped first by $100,000, then by another $150,000. I never wanted the house. It was too large, too theatrical, and burdened with meanings no renovation could remove. Still, I drove past it once. From the public road, I could see the upper windows reflecting a gray winter sky. The black gates were closed. Without Vanessa on the steps, it looked less like a palace and more like an expensive shell waiting for someone else's story. The visit gave me no thrill. Revenge is often advertised as a moment when the person who hurt you finally understands your value. Vanessa did not understand. My mother understood only in fragments. The satisfaction came from something quieter, their inability to write the ending for me. During the year after sentencing, I changed more than my passwords. I moved to a new apartment with a second bedroom and sunlight across the kitchen floor. I stopped keeping my schedule available to relatives. I created emergency contacts who had earned the role. I began therapy, initially to manage the anxiety caused by the fraud, then to examine why I had confused being needed with being loved. I learned that competence can become a family trap. When one child appears reliable, adults often direct resources toward the child who creates emergencies. The reliable child receives praise instead of protection, and responsibility instead of care. Later, everyone calls the arrangement natural because it has existed so long. I had participated in that arrangement. This did not make the fraud my fault. It meant recovery required more than punishing Vanessa. I had to retire from the role that made my exhaustion look like strength. My mother and I went almost a year without speaking. She sent holiday cards and updates about the condominium. She never apologized directly. Her messages said she hoped time would heal us, as if time had completed the mortgage application. Finally, I wrote back. I told her that contact would require 3 things: acknowledgement of what she had done without blaming Cole or Vanessa, repayment of the legal expenses caused by her actions to the extent she could afford, and family counseling after Vanessa's release if all of us chose to rebuild. I made clear that reconciliation was not guaranteed. My mother waited 3 weeks. Then she sent a letter. It was not perfect. She still described herself as desperate and deceived, but she wrote that she had given away information that was not hers, witnessed signatures she knew I had not made, and tried to frighten me into accepting the crime after it was discovered. She admitted that losing the house was a consequence of her choices. She enclosed the first of small monthly payments toward my legal fees. I accepted the payment. I did not translate it into forgiveness. Vanessa wrote from prison twice. The first letter focused on Cole's manipulation and the suffering caused by incarceration. The second was different. She said another woman in her unit had been convicted after using her daughter's identity for utilities and credit cards. Vanessa initially judged the woman harshly, then recognized the same excuses she had used. She wrote that she had treated my stability as an unlimited natural resource. She did not ask me to visit. I read the letter several times. Then I placed it in a file with the court records. Remorse might become real. It might also be another version of the performance that had carried her through life. I no longer needed to decide immediately. Urgency had always been Vanessa's favorite weapon. 2 years after Naomi's call, I bought a home of my own. It was not a mansion. It was a brick townhouse near a park, with 2 bedrooms, a small office, and a back garden that had been neglected by the previous owner. The purchase price was less than a fifth of Bellwether Lane's. I saved for the down payment, compared lenders, read every document, and signed my own name at the closing table. Naomi handled the transaction. When she asked how I wanted my name recorded, we both laughed. The sound surprised me because the original question had once felt like a siren. This time I answered without hesitation. Evelyn Grace Morgan, exactly as it appeared on my identification, with no representative and no power of attorney. After signing, I held the key in my palm. There was no photographer, no cream suit, and no caption about a next chapter. The room contained only Naomi, my agent, a stack of completed documents, and the knowledge that every number had been verified. I spent the first night on a mattress in the living room because my furniture had not arrived. Rain tapped against the windows. Around midnight, I walked through the empty rooms and thought about the house Vanessa had tried to buy, the family home my mother had lost, and the strange fact that buildings had carried so much of our conflict. One represented image, one represented history, and this one represented choice. My phone lit up with a message from my mother congratulating me. She did not ask for the address. That restraint was new. The following spring, I planted rosemary, lavender, and white roses in the back garden. I chose white roses because my father used to grow them along our old fence. For years, I had believed honoring him meant keeping every promise exactly as I made it, even after circumstances changed. Now I understood that loyalty to the dead should not require surrendering the life still in front of me. Vanessa was released early to a halfway house after serving most of her sentence. She found administrative work with a nonprofit that helped women build basic financial skills. The irony did not escape either of us. Through our attorneys, she began making restitution payments. They were small and would continue for years. We met once in a therapist's office. She looked thinner and older. Without styled hair, lighting, and the practiced energy she once carried into every room, she seemed almost unfamiliar. She apologized without using the words misunderstanding, opportunity, or family. She said she had wanted the Bellwether house because it would make people believe she had already become the person she was selling. Once the image existed, she believed money would follow. My name was merely the strongest material available. I told her that was precisely the problem. I had never been material. She nodded. We did not hug. We did not plan lunch. The meeting ended with the possibility of another meeting, which was more honest than a dramatic reconciliation. Some people who heard the story expected me to say the closing attorney saved me. Naomi did save me from an enormous financial loss, and I will always be grateful. But the call only opened a door. I still had to walk through it while my mother cried, my sister accused me of betrayal, relatives judged me, creditors doubted me, and official systems demanded proof. The version of me my family counted on would have treated their panic as more important than my safety. She would have signed something temporary, paid something urgent, or agreed to keep the police out of it. She would have called surrender compassion. That woman did not complete the closing. The house on Bellwether Lane eventually sold to a retired couple who turned the wine room into a library. I learned this from Naomi, not because I kept watching. By then, the listing no longer appeared in my searches. Vanessa's old company name had disappeared from the internet, except in archived court documents. My fraudulent amended returns were marked resolved. The alerts on my credit file became quiet. My life did not return to what it had been before the call. That was never the goal. Before the call, I was useful to everyone and known by almost no one. Afterward, I became deliberate about who received access, not only to documents and passwords, but to my time, money, attention, and instinct to rescue. On the second anniversary of my closing, Naomi mailed me a small brass plaque. It read, "Owned by Evelyn Grace Morgan." I attached it inside the garden gate, where it could not impress anyone passing on the street. I saw it each morning when I went outside with coffee. It reminded me of a fact that should have been simple but took a federal case, a lost family home, and years of repair to understand. My sister had believed my identity was valuable because it could buy her a luxury house. She never understood that its real value was that it belonged to me.